Back on October 27th, Apple announced the newest generation of their flagship notebook, the MacBook Pro with Touch Bar. I reviewed the 13-inch models at launch, but now I've had my own personal 15-inch model for a while. In this review, I want to go a little more in-depth with the new Macs, as well as update you on my thoughts now that they've been out for a while. I'm Jason with Maslintech, and this is my review of the 2016 MacBook Pro 3 months later. First of all, let's summarize the points I made about the 13-inch models back in November. On the cosmetic side of things, I'm still loving the space gray color. It's held up well so far, with no noticeable chipping to the casing. Apple also hit another home run with the keyboard. The second generation butterfly keys are fantastic to type on, and extremely responsive, and loud. Seriously, everyone around you will hear them loud and clear. The shallow depth takes some adjusting to, but once you've adjusted, the key strikes resemble that of a small mechanical keyboard. The trackpads are still top of the game. The 13-inch models have a larger trackpad than any other Apple computer made prior, and the 15-inch model just swallows those. In fact, I'll say the 15-inch Pro's trackpad is too large. I find my palms hitting the outer corners of the trackpad frequently, and have to twist my hands to rest my fingers on the F and J keys to avoid bumping the trackpad. Thankfully, palm rejection is mostly solid, with accidental clicks being rare. I'd honestly prefer the 13-inch trackpad on the 15-inch body if Apple gave that option. If the trackpad ever supports the Apple Pencil, my opinion may change, but for now, it's just too large. But enough about the trackpad. Let's talk about the displays. They're beautiful. The color reproduction and viewing angles are fantastic, and the glare on the panel is minimal, even in harsh light. This is partly thanks to the brighter 500 nit panel. Pixel densities did not change from the Retina models, but side by side, the difference is obvious. The bezels are slightly thinner, allowing for a smaller overall footprint from the previous generations as well. Finally, let's talk about the most controversial features of the newest MacBook Pros, the Touch Bar and the ports. First, the Touch Bar. Do I use it much? Sure, but not in the way Apple intended. I constantly adjust brightness and audio with the built-in sliders, but the per-app functions have gone mostly untouched for me. Final Cut Pro has some useful shortcuts, but realistically, they maybe save me 15 seconds in a 90-minute editing session. Safari's quick tab switching is nice to visually see what I have open, but like Final Cut, it's an app I'm familiar with, and can use the keyboard shortcuts without having to look down. Other apps use the Touch Bar well, like QuickTime, showing you a progress slider with previews, or Finder, with a shortcut for tagging files. These instances are an elegant use of the Touch Bar and really show off what it can be. If I had to guess, I'd say the functionality of the Touch Bar will get a big update when Apple releases their next operating system. In the meantime, let's talk about an app that changed my opinion of the Touch Bar. In talking with other Touch Bar owners, Better Touch Tool came up as a must-have app. I downloaded it and spent some time setting it up to my liking, and I must say, it's a game changer. Better Touch Tool is a third-party app that can create custom Touch Bar functions without the need to know how to code. With a little trial and error, I set up a handful of shortcuts I use constantly, and it's cut down time on my workflow significantly. For instance, if I want to capture a screen recording, I have a shortcut set up to open QuickTime and automatically activate the keyboard shortcut that brings up the recording menu. Another function opens Finder and takes me to a folder nested 3 folders deep. This saves me so much time in clicks and hunting for the right folder. Better Touch Tool has its limits, but for now and for the price, it's almost a necessity on the new computers. Moving over to the other controversial design decision, let's take a look at the ports. I've now been living without regular USB ports, MagSafe, an SD card slot, and HDMI. So how inconvenient is it to use all USB Type-C instead? Well, when I need those connections, it can be pretty darn inconvenient. I did my homework on adapters before I took the plunge, so I got all of my functionality with just a handful of adapters, but it is hardly an elegant solution. USB adapters are cheap and plentiful, but HDMI and Thunderbolt 3.2 adapters are a little more expensive. All in, I spent a little over $120 on about 6 adapters. Sticking in the Apple ecosystem isn't too bad, with AirDrop and AirPlay working flawlessly between my Mac, iPhone, and Apple TV, but importing footage from a DSLR or gaming rig sends me searching into my backpack for the right cable. Overall, this is a minor inconvenience if I have my bag with me, which I usually do, and should become less and less of a hassle as more manufacturers adopt USBC. Alright, so all of the above is relevant to both the 13 and 15-inch models. Let's get into detail about the 15-inch model. My specific configuration is a step above the stock configurations, with AMD's Radeon 460 GPU and a 1TB SSD. This is on top of a 2.7 GHz quad-core Skylake chip with 16 gigs of RAM. Performance has been solid across the board, far outpacing any previous MacBook Pro. SSD speeds are off the charts, capping out Blackmagic's disk speed test at 2000 megabytes per second read speeds and just under that on the write speeds. Continuing with benchmarks, the CPU scores are good, but not what I expected, with my Geekbench score coming in at just a hair under 13,000. I thought that seemed a little low, so I compared it to my older 2013 model score. That model hit a little over 13,000 on a 3-year-old chip at a lower clock speed. Geekbench is not the end-all metric, nor always a perfect real-world representation, so next, I ran Cinebench R15. I got a CPU score of 673 and an OpenGL score of 85.22 frames per second. Once again, neither metric is exceptional, so how does it hold up in day-to-day use? Thankfully, this is where the hardware shines. The combination of a fast drive that quickly boots the computer and launches applications nearly instantaneously, the 16GB RAM cap that has never been an issue for me, even when running virtual machines, and the GPU that renders Apple's Motion 5 or Final Cut Pro X are night and day faster than my old 2013 MacBook Pro. Also, the new MacBook Pro stays relatively quiet when doing all of this. The final render on a 4K project will kick in the fans for sure, but it's nowhere near as loud as the old Retina models were. Same when recording into my mic with GarageBand. On my 2013 MacBook Pro, the fans would kick in usually after about 10 minutes of recording. As a result, I got used to positioning my computer about 2 feet away from my mic when recording, so that it wouldn't pick up the fans in the background. In contrast, my Touch Bar model, in the 3 or 4 sessions I recorded with it, has not kicked in the fans at any audible level yet. Finally, let's talk about the graphics cards on the new computers. Apple, in recent years, has shied away from competing on the high end when it comes to graphics performance. The 15-inch MacBook Pros from 2013 to 2015 didn't even ship with dedicated graphics on the low end, so when Apple announced that dedicated cards were coming across the board in a thinner and lighter design, I was pleasantly surprised. That being said, Apple still isn't competing at the high end of graphics performance, just higher than they were before. My particular model has the highest tier GPU available from Apple, the AMD Radeon Pro 460. This card is paired with 4GB of GDDR5 memory and is rated from AMD to be pretty comparable to the standard PS4 at about 1.86 teraflops at peak performance. Apple's tight integration between hardware and software really shines here, with all of Apple's apps running swimmingly. At this point, MacBooks can handle 4K video in Final Cut without breaking much of a sweat, so to really test out the GPU, we need to play some games. To level the playing field a bit, the games in this test are running in boot camp on Windows 10 Pro. With near PS4 specs in mind, I tested a handful of modern games: Rocket League, Overwatch, and Dark Souls 3. Both Rocket League and Overwatch fared very well, maintaining 60 FPS, running at 1920 by 1200. Rocket League was running on max settings, and Overwatch was running on medium settings. Dark Souls 3, on the other hand, was a little more demanding. To maintain a solid 60 frames per second, I had to lower the resolution to 1280 by 800 on medium settings. Stepping up to 1080p would run above 40 frames most of the time, with notable drops into the teens. I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut those gaming results a bit short because my battery died. Now before you start complaining about me gaming off of a power adapter, I wasn't. The newest MacBook Pro, with its more energy efficient components and slightly higher wattage charger, can still experience battery drain when plugged into power. This is an issue I've never had before with a Mac, and the issue only gets worse when I unplug it from the charger. Herein lies my biggest issue with the new 15-inch MacBook Pro, the battery life. You may have seen Consumer Reports initially not endorse the new Touch Bar MacBook Pros for their battery issues, but those were completely unrelated to the issues I'm having with it. My issue with the battery life is how drastic it can vary. In my typical workflow, I see anywhere from 2.5 to 4 hours per charge, doing something simple, like web browsing, with Slack and iTunes open. But the computer will mirror a 2-hour 1080p movie over AirPlay to my Apple TV and only drop 15%. Peeking into Activity Monitor doesn't help out in pinpointing the issue either, but I can confidently say that the battery life on the 15-inch model is worse than before. Battery life between Windows 10 and macOS has been pretty similar, which is usually not the case on Macs, making me think it'll get better over time with software updates. So in conclusion, the 2016 15-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar is like a jet. It's streamlined, fast, beautiful, and expensive. With a starting price tag of $2,400, plus the cost of dongles, it's not in everyone's budget, nor does it need to be. Unless you're doing heavy video or animation work, the 13-inch model will get the job done with better battery life. And if you want a laptop to game on, there are other options better suited. But if you're looking for a big screen and a machine with horsepower to edit video or create animations or handle multiple virtual machines, the 15-inch Touch Bar MacBook Pro is a fantastic notebook. Apple really did rethink every part of this computer, and for the most part, they got it right. Some changes are lateral, for instance, losing the magnetic charger but gaining the ability to charge from any port. Some are worse, like a physically smaller battery, and some are instantly welcome, like the improved display. Time will tell if the Touch Bar and massive trackpad become must-have features, but the more I use this Mac, the more I understand Apple's vision for it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about the new Macs that I didn't bring up in the review, drop me a line in the comments or over on Twitter. If people are interested, I might also do a more in-depth gaming video. Let me know what you think. Once again, I'm Jason with Maslin Tech. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.